Hello and welcome to the next episode of Matriarchetype. This week we're back as the wife. Topic today that I'm choosing is motherhood options for myself as a transgender woman, but also I'm going to try and open that up to just generally discussing about motherhood options specifically for LGBTQIA plus couples and families. So a bit of an announcement which is really exciting. My husband and I have decided to start a family. We are going to be choosing a form in which we can have hopefully a baby or a child. So I'm going to talk about the conclusion that we find is best for us at the end of the video, so stick around for that if you're excited. Otherwise, yeah, let's just dive straight in. Okay, so let's get straight into part one, unable to have biological children. So that obviously refers to myself, as I do not have a womb. So if I want to have children, as I do, I'm forced into other options. So obviously not everyone does want children, and that's something that I especially think our generation are a little bit more aware of. Not everyone wants children or kids, that's absolutely valid. And so for this video, I think if you aren't really interested in children but you still want to watch the channel and support, I guess just stick around for the entertaining anecdotes and aesthetics, I guess. Hopefully that's enough. I also want to say about not having a womb, that's often an argument that TERFs or transphobic people use to say, oh, that's why trans women are not real women, because they can't have children. And I think that's very damaging to cis women or any person of any gender that can't have biological children. It doesn't change their gender identity. And I think that's something that hopefully most of my viewers and subscribers will have obviously learned and understood, and that's the more progressive outlook that sex and gender identity are different things. There are just so many other situations that might involve you not having children as well. As I said earlier in the intro, I am going to be talking about these options kind of lent on my perspective, or the perspective of a trans woman. So let's go straight into them. Now, one thing I will say before I go any further, amidst my research, and I'm going to link everything that I cite in the description of the video, so please do check it out if you're interested, or if you just want to check, if you want to fact check me, you can do. I welcome that. But there was one thing I actually found on the NHS website in the UK. Obviously I'm based in the UK. It was a very well worded, very progressive LGBTQIA plus community friendly link, and I'm going to put that specifically because I was even impressed. I mean, the UK hasn't got the best reputation at the moment. I mean, it's progressive, but it's going backwards. But this link specifically was really great, and it used very non-gendered language about people that can have children, people that can't have children. So I was very impressed. I'm definitely going to link that as well. So I'm going to start off with the option of IUI or IVF, which is the kind of most, in my mind, the most technically advanced option, I guess. I didn't know when I started this research project the difference between IUI and IVF. I'm not going to go into too much graphic detail because it's might borderline out of what my channel, I don't know, the YouTube guidelines and stuff. But I'm going to keep it as professional as I can. So IUI, forgive my pronunciation, is intrauterine insemination. See, now you know. You're just learning all the stuff. And IVF is in vitro fertilization. The description reads as follows. Artificial insemination, or intrauterine insemination, involves inserting a male's semen through the cervix and into the uterus close to the time of ovulation. It is a simpler, less invasive form of fertilization treatment. In vitro fertilization, or IVF, is a process where a woman's eggs are fertilized with a man's sperm outside of the body, and once they are fertilized, they are transplanted into the woman's body. Close to 1 in 30 babies in Australia are conceived with IVF. Some of my sources were Australian, apparently. Again, forgive the language there, but it's pretty much the difference between how the semen and the egg are put together, I guess is how I would say that. Again, going to talk about it from my perspective. That won't work for me because I do not produce my own eggs. And it has been something that I've thought about, of obviously using my husband's side of things. But that's never been something that he's been too bothered about anyway. So it looks like we're going to probably go down another route. That would be spoilers if I told you the answer, but stick around. Also, fun fact, if you're in the UK, anyone who registered to donate eggs or sperm after the 1st of April 2005 can no longer remain anonymous and must provide information about their identities. I came across this while I was doing my research and I just found it quite interesting. So this is because a child born as a result of donated eggs or sperm is legally entitled to find out the identity of the donor when that person becomes an adult age 18 in the UK. So this might not relate to you if you're not in the UK, but I found that kind of interesting. I think that's different to how I imagined adoption or donation of eggs and semen and stuff like that when I was younger. So I guess things are changing, and I think that we've always talked about, say we were to have a child from non-biological forms, of course that's the only option, that we would always be very open to that child. I don't think it's something that should be hidden or also shunned away from, and that's our personal opinion. I remember an ex I had once, when we were dating, his dad found out he was adopted at like 40, 50 years old. And it was like a big deal. Imagine your whole life being different to how you'd perceived it to be. I mean, that can be, I imagine, quite a big deal. So it's always something that we're going to be very open about anyway. So moving on. The costs, of IUI and IVF. I've Googled around and researched as much as I can. Approximately, IUI is usually only around £1,000. It's less invasive, as they say. And IVF, it can be like around £5,000 per cycle as well, and it can take several cycles. You often hear a lot about people that were unsuccessful in the first few attempts of IVF and then they run out of funds, which is, I imagine, such a heartbreaking phenomenon to have tried so far and it not work out exactly how you wanted in the end, and also have run your finances down because of that. It must be really heartbreaking. Next, surrogacy. So surrogacy is something I hadn't even thought about. I'm just going to define it now. This is based on the government UK definition. Surrogacy is when a person carries a baby for someone who is unable to conceive or carry a child themselves. So fairly self-explanatory. Nice non-gender specific language there. We love to see it. And I hadn't really thought about this. And again, this is why this video is so helpful to even myself. But it looks like there are two different kinds of, well, there are definitely two different types of surrogacy, but there seems to be two different forms in which surrogacy can be agreed on. Going through the organisations that are like non-profit and they're like charities which put you in touch with someone, and then like just asking family and friends. I'm pretty sure that's legal. You can't pay for it, you can't ask them, but like, I don't know, it's like a discussion you can have, I guess. So I don't have anyone particularly in my circle that I know would want to do that. But it's something obviously that doesn't come up over tea and cinnamon buns every often. Like, so, would you ever carry someone else's child for them? I guess though it'd be something that if I was offered, I think my husband and I would think about it, would consider it, I guess. But it's not something that we would ever feel comfortable approaching, maybe. I don't know, but that might change. So the main thing it looked like in this research is that you can't pay for a baby. Of course not. That would be terrible. So instead you can only cover the reasonable expenses of the person carrying your child, which again though can be quite extensive because you're pretty much asking out for a year of their life at least. So it says the typical expenses paid in the UK for surrogacy can be anywhere from £12,000 to £25,000. Of course though, if you did do it through friends and family, you could negotiate lower if you wanted to, but you can't outright just gift the money. That's illegal. I found out there's a whole bunch of legalities, but I'll get onto them in a second. Before that, I researched and there is two types of surrogacy. There is straight surrogacy and there is host surrogacy. Straight surrogacy is not for the straights. No, it's not what it's about. I'm going to read it as follows, so apologies for it's boring. I'm going to read it in full and give you some clips of me cooking a cinnamon bun. Straight, also known as full or traditional surrogacy, is when the surrogate provides her own eggs to achieve the pregnancy. The intended father is either a heterosexual or male same-sex relationship, or an individual, provides a sperm sample for conception through either self-insemination at home. There may be additional health and legal risks to carrying out self-insemination at home compared to treatment in a clinic or artificial insemination with the help of a fertility clinic. If either the surrogate or intended father has fertility issues, then embryos may be also created in vitro or transferred into the uterus of the surrogate. So I guess, well, poorly read by me, apologies for that. I guess it also kind of does link to the possibility of surrogacy and IVF or IUI, but it sounds like that's kind of just a direct approach, you know what I mean? Whereas host surrogacy, also referred to as gestational surrogacy, is when the surrogate doesn't provide her own egg to achieve the pregnancy. In such pregnancies, embryos are created in vitro and transferred into the uterus of the surrogate using eggs of the intended mother fertilized with sperm of the intended father or donor, eggs of a donor fertilized with sperm, or the intended father, where the intended mother cannot use her own eggs, or the intending parents are a same-sex male couple, for example. Again, some of these definitions are a little bit less progressive, and I apologise for that. That was from the government UK, but I didn't want to ad-lib too much because then I can't really define it myself. I wanted to use citations. So again, if we were to even do this, we wouldn't have the option of host surrogacy because I couldn't provide my eggs, as we know, because that's the same with IVF. It would be straight surrogacy, and for us, I guess, then it comes into the morality of my husband would be the biological father if he donated his, and then it would also have the biological mother of the surrogate person, or mother, or parent. So I guess it'd be up to whether like my husband and I wanted that, and obviously to have it'd be like happy on my side to be like, go ahead, have the biology of our child through you. That's great. I'd love that for you. But whether he wants that or not is up to him. But it's an interesting moral dilemma because I think from my life as well, I've never expected to be able to do this anyway. So it's not like I feel like I'm missing out on anything. It's like it was never an option, but I've always wanted kids. Do you see the dilemma? You see why I'm here right now? Let's continue to read. So I found a whole bunch of like legalities about surrogacy, and so you have to either go through surrogacy organisations, which are organisations specifically designed to facilitate surrogacy or introduce you to people, or you can create a surrogacy agreement with your friends and family, but that's not legally enforced. So you like at any point the surrogate parent could just tell her like, I'm sorry, I want to keep the kid, which apparently does happen, which is understandable, but like from the intended parent's perspective, that would obviously be quite sad. And it even warns before entering into a surrogacy agreement, you should be fully aware of the legal positioning. So the Surrogacy Arrangements Act 1985 makes it clear that it's an offence to advertise that you are seeking a surrogate or a potential surrogate looking for IPs, intended parents, I think that stands for. It's also an offence under the Act to arrange or negotiate a surrogacy arrangement as a commercial enterprise. However, there are a number of non-profit organisations listed above that lawfully assist potential surrogates and intended parents to navigate their surrogacy. So you can't just you have to be a charity in order to facilitate surrogacy, which is wild. There's loads, like it's a criminal offence to advertise that you're looking for a surrogate. It's a criminal offence for third parties that aren't directly involved to advertise that they facilitate surrogacy. It's a criminal offence for third parties to negotiate the terms of the surrogacy agreement for any payment. So any organisations that do it must be non-profit, which is, again, kind of wild. Following the birth, there is a legal process, the parental order process, to transfer legal parenthood from the surrogate to the IP. So again, I mean, this might sound quite obvious, but if you do choose a surrogate and you agree everything, that surrogate parent is still the legal parent until you pass over parenthood, which is something that, like, if you just didn't do that, you didn't know to do that and you forgot. I take it for granted, but like as a 30-year-old trans woman who's just got married and wants to start a family, I'm now having to think about these things, which is kind of wild. Like I always never had this option, so I never had to break down all of these morality and legal issues. Like, it's very interesting. Or I hope it is anyway. I hope you're having as much fun as I am. So another thing I found in our in my research was co-parenting, and the cost of this I couldn't really find. The definition of co-parenting is when two people agree to conceive and raise a child together when they are not in a relationship. Each person may have their own partner, so it's possible that a child has more than two parents or carers. In the UK, a child that can only have two legal parents, even if more adults are involved in their upbringing. So a child's legal parents are usually its biological mother and biological father, or biological parents, or non-birthing parent is also said, and that's actually the wording here, so I'm very impressed. The Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act in 2008 sets out who a child's legal parents will be when they are conceived through artificial insemination. It also allows co-parenting for same-sex couples. And that's actually quoting Stonewall, which is a UK charity, which is great for LGBTQIA plus rights and community. So I hadn't really officially heard of this. I think I remember a few anecdotes of people that had done this. I didn't understand it from like a legal standpoint. And again, not a bad option if we were to, like the surrogacy, know someone that wanted to do this, but we currently don't. So even if we were interested, I don't know if it would work for us. But potentially we could find like, you know, a couple that have one person that has a working womb and they don't have access to semen to make a baby, and we could provide that as a couple. But then again, I think that if I couldn't legally be the parent and the birthing parent on their side, my husband on our side was the legal parent, I would be upset a bit, I must be honest. I mean, it must work for some, absolutely, and if so, that's completely valid. But I would want to be the legal parent. I think we want the idea of, you know, two parents and children. It might not necessarily work for everyone. Obviously, I'm so for polyamory and everything else. It's more just what we envisioned, I guess. But that could definitely change, like absolutely. So next we get to adoption, and I'm sure many of you have already heard of this, but I'm going to define it anyway. So the definition of adoption on Google, which is citing Oxford Languages, is the action or fact of legally taking another's child and bringing it up as your own or one's own, or the fact of being adopted. That's really unhelpful as an adoption, as a definition, isn't it? Really, if I could define adoption in my own words, it would be taking the legal parenthood from one person to another, I guess, so that you're their legal parent or guardian, and making that official by law, I guess. I think for us as well, it's something that we always imagined being the best option. However, we have got a few circular friends, and it's also kind of well known in the community in the UK that it can be very challenging for LGBTQIA plus couples to adopt. Now, most sites and government websites and everything will all tell you that, of course not, same-sex couples can adopt, and obviously you see it much more these days. And when I was growing up, you just didn't see it in the UK, which is a terrible thing. But now more and more you see a lot more of the rainbow-coloured families coming out, which is absolutely fantastic, and we love to see it. I just do think there is still a bit of a wall for the adoption agencies to let that happen, unfortunately. But I think with the times progressing, we see it more. However, the way the UK is going, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it less, which is a very sad truth. But with the government we have at the moment and the bills that they're putting through, I just would not be shocked if adoption agencies felt less hesitant to reject a couple based on that. It wouldn't shock me at the way the UK is at the moment. If you're watching from another country, you're in the position that that's not the case, and I pray that that's true. There are obviously many countries where that's not even an option, which is very sad. But the tricky thing for us as well, for my husband and I as a couple, is that, I mean, I did another video on this playlist about being very heteronormative as a couple, especially on the outside and externally. We look very much like a cis couple. Hopefully, I pass anyway. I won't get into that now. But I actually got mistaken for being pregnant several times, which is hilarious. So I imagine, unless I'm specifically outed, that during the adoption process, we may have the same privileges as a cis couple that are adopting because they can't have biological children, something like that, which may be in our favour. As sad as it is to admit that privilege will be helpful, it might be the case. So a couple of different things on the government website that say you have to be, if you want to adopt, over 21, single or married or in a civil partnership, or unmarried, like a same-sex or opposite-sex couple who just haven't decided to marry, the partner of a child's parent. So kind of, I think that's fairly open. 21, which is quite old, I guess, if you imagine that we're legally adults at 18 in the UK, but fine. There's also a couple of other things that I've seen that it like suggests, and so like living as a couple for 2 years, You can be renting as well. There's no stigma about not owning your own house, because if they did, they'd have no one in our generation that could have a child to adopt. So again, I think that it comes down to the LGBTQIA plus thing. It just really kind of depends. And especially if we are thinking of moving, again, I don't know. I can't guarantee that adoption would work for us. But of this list, potentially it would be at the top. But wait till the end to see my answer. Another option as well is fostering. So I tried to find the difference specifically between fostering, but the answer again is kind of self-explanatory. The primary difference between fostering and adoption is that fostering is usually temporary, whilst adoption is typically a more permanent long-term solution. So that kind of makes sense. For me, fostering, I imagine like having probably an older child as well come and live with you and look after them as much as you can until something happens or changes, they have to move, which again is quite sad. And I guess stability, I think, is something I would want to give to our children. But there are many different children out there a bit older without homes, and we would obviously want to open our doors to that. I think that you can layer that as well. So if we did adopt our own child, that would mean that we weren't up for fostering if we had the space and the rooms to have another child come and stay with us whenever they needed someone. We'd love to have that communication with any agency. So that's something I imagine maybe working as well. Now, so last but kind of not least, I'm going to talk about womb transplants. So it's something that you hear recently in the news, and I tried to do some research on it, but I just did not get far. It's still very much, it's more like in the research process, I think. I'm not sure, don't quote me on this, if there has been a successful womb transplant, but I think that it's progressing very much. I would personally love that. I would absolutely, I mean, in an ideal world, and I can't speak for the entire community, for myself as a trans woman, I remember thinking as a kid, if I could wake up tomorrow in a girl body, erase my memory as a guy, and just start fresh, like I would do. So for me, a womb transplant is something that I always dreamt about, especially when I was dating and I wasn't married. It seemed to me to kind of be that, I mean, because I've been broken up with before because I couldn't give someone biological children. To my face, that's what's been said to me. When we'd been dating for like years, obviously they knew that was never going to be a possibility, but they grew up and that's what they wanted. Ouch. But so, you know, having a womb would be something that I would love. But for me, I think that to be at the vanguard of that technology, to be at the forefront of the innovation, is something that's quite scary, because you don't know what could happen to yourself, or of course, but also to the embryo, the unborn child. But I don't know. I just hope for future generations that technology becomes more apparent and is realised, and is an option for the future generation of people making wacky YouTube videos about motherhood options. I hope that womb transplants are at the forefront and the first option for the trans community. That would be amazing. I also imagine I don't know this for sure, but I imagine there are also a lot of trans men that would be happy to donate their womb. I don't know if it works like that. I don't know the legality behind it or the options, but I can understand if I know a lot of trans men that don't want the period, don't want the womb, take it away, and us trans women are like, hey, I'll take one. Or, I mean, the amount of boob jokes that we make about that. Go. Just, honey, that's the thing. It's the thing. So, in conclusion, I think that my initial instinct that adoption is right for my husband and I has kind of been strengthened and, fortified, which is great in itself. But I really did actually learn quite a lot about the different options that were available. I didn't actually know co-parenting was so defined and it was such an option. I wish there was more on womb transplants, because that is definitely something I would be very interested in. But in honesty, I think that anything that is medically innovative and new, there are obviously going to be certain risks. And one thing with womb transplant for me would be very upsetting, very scarring, if it were to not be successful down the line, or, you can see where I'm going, but for me that would be quite distressing. But potentially in future generations that could be something that is an option for trans women specifically, and that's fantastic, and I'm so here for that. I would very much support that endeavour and that technology. But for myself and my husband, it looks like adoption for us is going to be the the route we go down, I think, which is exciting if you think about it. I think as well, with our potential to move country, adoption is something that is well known across different, continents, whereas specific legalities in the UK about, for example, surrogacy and stuff like that might be more difficult than other countries. Again, the legality of parental ownership might come into it. So I guess for ourselves, adoption is key, which is very exciting. So thank you for watching this far. I really appreciate you looking at my mockery of cooking. In a second, I'm going to actually take out the real cinnamon buns I baked from the oven, so that is going to be hilarious. Again, obviously this video is more focused on kind of like a segment of my life, my husband's life, but next week I'm going to go back to pop culture. I should be doing a deep dive into the discography of the wonderful and fabulous and gorgeous Kim Petras. Don't hold me to that because plans do change, but at the moment that's what's in the running, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks again for watching till the end. I love you all very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye. Oh my god. Oh my god. What the frick is this? Let's do it again because that was not very good. Each time I get a little bit more innovative. How am I meant to clap? Can you even see my oven? Sounds like a euphemism. It was alright. 3 claps in succession. Are you lucky? Today. Oh, I've got to pronounce these words now. It's gestational. So I try that again. Why is my room orange? Why am I orange? I'm gonna eat cinnamon bun on camera. End of first section.